The Yor'sahj encounter is just oozing with fun. There's a lot going on and his ads come in a colorful cast of characters. We'll try not to be too discriminatory and give each of them a chance to die. Especially that green one. We don't like those kinds around here. Yor'sahj is a one-phase fight that is full of surprises. This fight can be quite random in nature and requires your raid to adapt to different situations. When this guide was made, Yor'sahj had around 141 million health and spawned different color blood ads, corrupted minions, and mana voids. Blood ads had around 6 million HP each. Corrupted minions are AoE down while the mana void is focused as quickly as possible each time it spawns. You'll want to bring 2 tanks, 5 to 7 healers, and a balanced mix of DPS. Depending on how you prefer to do the fight, melee or range can have an advantage, but a balanced mix will work as well. The boss's main attack throughout the fight will be Void Bolt. This nuke hits its primary target for high shadow damage and reduces the healing they can take for a short duration. The rest of Yor'sahj's spells will be determined by the ads that he spawns. Over the course of the encounter, the boss will repeatedly spawn sets of blood ads from the outside of the room. These will spawn 3 at a time and slowly make their way to the boss in the center of the room. Each blood ad will heal nearby blood ads upon being attacked. Once a blood has been killed, remaining bloods will become immune to damage. It is important that your raid becomes familiar with what spell is granted by what blood. There are 6 possible colors from which 3 will be randomly chosen. Yellow, or glowing blood, causes Void Bolt to hit all nearby targets, reduces Yor'sahj's cooldowns by half, and increases his attack speed by 50%. Blue, or Cobalt blood, grants the boss the Mana Void spell. This drains all mana from ranged casters and healers and stores it in an ad that spawns called the Mana Void. Killing the Mana Void will redistribute the mana evenly among all players within 18 yards. Red, or Crimson blood, grants the boss the Searing Blood spell. He will randomly sear the blood of different players. This deals moderate fire damage that increases significantly the further the player is from the boss. Black blood causes multiple Forgotten One ads to spawn. These fixate a random player and cast Psychic Slice, a spell that channels a wave of psychic force in front of them, dealing moderate shadow damage. Green, or Acidic blood, causes the room to begin digesting your raid. This deals moderate nature damage to all players and splashes to nearby players. Purple, or Shadow blood, grants the boss the Deep Corruption spell. This causes healing and absorption effects to cause a stacking debuff on their targets. When the debuff reaches 5 stacks, it will detonate, dealing high shadow damage to all nearby players. Let's see how to handle this. Because the fight will change depending on which blood ads Yor'sahj decides to spawn, there is no straight walkthrough for this fight. Instead, your raid will need to know how to handle each spawn separately and be able to logically put the combinations together. Throughout the fight, Yor'sahj will spawn sets of 3 ads. Each one grants him a new spell, and your raid will be able to choose one to kill. There are 2 general categories for each ad. Ones that make it harder to heal, and ones that increase raid damage. Blue and purple make it difficult to heal, while yellow, red, black, and green will increase raid damage. Let's talk about the healing ads first. Blue causes Mana Void. This spell drains all of the ranged caster and healer mana and stores it in an ad called the Mana Void. This ad will roam freely around the boss and release all of the drained mana back to nearby players upon being killed. The first thing to remember is that because this ad drains mana when it spawns and not over time, players can use mana cooldowns after it has appeared. Things like Mana Tide, Innervate, and Shadow Fiend may want to be saved for this phase. The second part to remember is that the ad only returns mana to players who are near it when it dies, so make sure to have ranged casters and healers stacked near the ad before killing it. All in all, this shouldn't be too difficult. Purple affects healing in another way. Players will gain the Deep Corruption buff during this phase. Any direct healing spell received will stack this buff. When it gets to 5, it will detonate, dealing high damage to all nearby players. This means once a player has received 4 heals, they cannot be healed again until their stack resets. This takes around 20 seconds. To make this easier for us, we assigned a healer to each party group. One healer is in charge of group 1, one for group 2, and so on. One thing to keep in mind is that AoE heals place a stack on every player they hit. This means Prayer of Healing puts a stack on everybody in his party, and Healing Rain puts one stack on everybody in the raid. Keep this in mind when using spells during this phase. The rest of the adds will cause your raid to take more damage. The important difference between them is the positioning they force your raid into. Red will cause higher damage to players further from the boss, so everybody must stack directly on top of him. Green will deal increased damage to players who are stacked, so everybody must spread out evenly. Black will spawn adds that must be AoE down, so the raid will need to stack again. Yellow lowers the cooldown of the rest of his spells, including those gained from adds like red and green. The positioning of different phases is more important than what actually happens in them, and it is important that the raid understands how the phase positioning interacts. For example, having red and black together is good because both require your raid to stack tightly. Alternatively, having red and green together is almost impossible because green asks you to spread out while red makes you stack. Red and blue can also be tricky since the range will find it difficult to stack on the mana void when it dies if they need to stay stacked on the boss at the same time. Green and blue is similar because the raid should remain spread for green but must stack for the mana void's death. Keep in mind as well that keeping yellow in combination with any of the damage adds like green or red will cause much more raid damage. This shouldn't be too much of a problem though, since having yellow and green or yellow and red means the raid didn't get blue or purple and is free to heal. As said before, it is difficult to give an exact guide for this fight because of the random nature of the phases, but it is important that your raid understands each add and its interaction with the others. Keep in mind how the raid must position for the different adds and try to always keep two that work well together. If you found this guide helpful or informative, please remember to bookmark us at learntoraid.com, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter. As always, we hope this guide was helpful, and we'll see you at the next boss.
I wasn't feeling so good. I just didn't feel like playing anymore. So I went home, and I got all comfy and cozy and all scrunched up in front of my phonograph. And I sat there and I closed my eyes and listened to all the sweet